Does Invincible add anything new to the superhero genre? I think it does. Hello, everybody. I'm Anaji, and this is FMV Reviews. So today we're going to be talking about Invincible, which tells the story of Mark Greyson, is an up and coming superhero who starts coming into his powers. He's the son of a very Superman-like character named Omniman, and we watch as Mark Greyson as he's introduced into this superhero world that maybe being a superhero is a lot more difficult and dangerous than he had ever really imagined. So before I start really getting into this review, I just want to say that I'm going to be going into spoilers. I'm not going to really be holding back. And I'm going to say I think what makes Invincible add something new to the superhero genre to a certain extent is the fact that it has really good characters and it has a really interesting world. So let's get into it. I think Mark Grayson, who is Invincible, the titular character, is a pretty solid character. He's voice acted by Steven Yeun. Steven Yeun right now, his career I think is blowing up as it should be. I've been a fan of his ever since the Walking Dead days, and I think he imbues Mark with a very Peter Parker like quality. I would say Peter Parker's a pretty good parallel to Invincible in terms of personality. He's very earnest. He wants to do good, but he's young, he's inexperienced. And yeah, I look forward to seeing how Mark changes and grows as the show keeps going. I think that one of the advantages Invincible has compared to maybe like a Marvel or DC to a certain extent is that they're more willing to let Mark fail and also get into way more dangerous, complicated situations than I've seen really take place in the Marvel universe to a certain extent. But yes, I do look forward to seeing how this character grows up. And I think a big thing that's going to affect his upbringing is his father, Omni Man or Nolan Grayson. And I just gotta say, J.K. Simmons, I've already liked J.K. Simmons quite a lot, but man, he has a really great voice, and I think he does some really good voice acting work here. Omni Man is one of the most interesting villains I've seen in a while. We've kind of been seeing, and this is funny because it's Amazon too, but I think now that we're kind of past the 10-year Marvel stuff, and that enough people know these superhero tropes, that it's interesting to see this sort of subversion. And Omni Man's definitely a subversion of the Superman character in a way similar to Homelander, but he's differentiated enough in the sense that we get to see him be more conflicted about some of the things he's doing, but when he decides to act out and be violent, he it goes it is so shocking and so crazy violent, but yeah, I really look forward to seeing what else happens with this Omni-Man character and how the relationship between him and Mark starts to bounce off each other and affect each other as the series goes on. One of the other human characters that I thought was really interesting was Cecil, played by Walton Goggins. I did not know this was Walton Goggins. I'm so used to hearing Walton Goggins with that super exaggerated like Southern accent that when I looked through the credits and saw it was him, it made me like. I already liked the character already, but to know it was Walton Goggins made me go, "Wow, he's a even better actor than I thought he was." But yes, I think Cecil acts as this interesting human element where he works for the government. He kind of is he's working with these heroes to a certain extent, right? Like they call in the heroes whenever something really crazy is going on. But also they add this interesting element where, like I said, spoilers, I'm not gonna hold back. When this universe's version of the Justice League is murdered, watching him have to investigate who murdered Earth's champions adds this really interesting kind of human element, but also it kind of again reminds me of the boys in the sense of you're watching how humans would have to deal with these superpowered beings and how hopeless it seems at times, but also how determined humanity can be. So I definitely look forward to also seeing how Cecil develops as a character. To be honest, this has a pretty star-studded cast. I mean, you have Sandra O oh playing Mark's mom. I think Debbie. I think she's a great character. I'm glad that Sandra O oh is getting some work. You have a lot of the community cast here. I think you have the chick who played Greta. She's in this show as well. You have Zazie Beats. It just has a pretty star-studded cast, and for the most part, I think all of them do a really good job. I think the only person who distracts me is Jason Manzukis, but it's not because Jason Manzukis is doing a bad job. It's just that I'm familiar enough with his voice that it's hard for me not to see him when I hear his voice. But overall, yeah, I think this has a really great cast, and I think they do some really good work here. One of the things I talked about is the fact that I think the world of this show, Invincible, is really interesting. The world of Invincible sort of acts as this interesting mirror to the DC Marvel universe, where you definitely have characters and situations that remind you of Marvel and DC universe, except they're allowed to go way crazier and way more violent than those properties would necessarily do. Even though, to be real, the Zack Snyder stuff, if it's left to him, maybe these two will slide into each other more comfortably. But yes, I do think this world is really interesting. Also, as an animated series, this show has some pretty great animation. I don't know if they did this on purpose, but the animation style reminds me of the DC Universe stuff from the 90s slash early 2000s. It's like the characters' drawings is not super detailed, they're very angular. And this show mirrors that style. And it kind of further creates that sort of mirroring of the DC universe. And also, like, if you've been watching the DC animated films, it even mirrors those more. But what I like about it is that it uses that style, except you see it go way more violent and way more crazy than those animated features tend to go, which adds this like surprise when you see like, whoa, what is going on? But also, to be real, I'm sure you've heard me mention this before. I think in terms of adapting comic book stuff, that animation is the way to go, because I mean it makes sense, right? Like comic books are drawings, and animation is just one step to the left of that. It's just taking those drawings and do more of it to a certain extent, and it makes it where seeing these characters display their various powers and seeing the show do some really high concept stuff at times with animation. The animation is able to just handle it all. And yeah, seeing some of these characters display their powers, the animation just fully captures at times the visceralness and the thrill of some of these powers. And yeah, I would like to see more of these comic book stuff done with high quality animation, something like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So you've heard me mention it a couple here several times. The violence and the carnage in this show is absolutely insane. And it's one of the ways I think the show differentiates itself from the Marvel stuff or the DC stuff to a certain extent. I mean, this is what I mean. When I'm watching a show, it's not as if as a like a Western audience or someone who watches movies and TV shows and whatnot. It's not as if I've never seen violence before, but I know a show's violence is hitting me in a certain way if I have three reactions that I have when I see something really violent happen. I have the oh, I have get away from those people. Damn, or I have the disbelief laugh of and this show got all three of those out of me several times. The violence hits so hard here, but it makes for some really spectacular action scenes at times that I don't even think the Marvel movies can really touch it to a certain extent. So yeah, I would say the violence is a big part of this show. But I'm going to get into what I think is the reason why I think Invincible stands apart from something like The Boys to a certain extent. But before I get into that, if you're digging this review, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget that. All right, so let's get into it. I think the real secret sauce to this show of why it is capturing so many people's attention is that, let's talk about something like The Boys, right? It's on the same platform, Amazon. The Boys is a very cynical, very dark take on the superhero world. Sometimes it's so dark that it's like, it's kind of crazy sometimes how dark that show and cynical that show can be at times. And what I find what Invincible does really well is it does a really nice balance. So I would say Invincible, the world and the characters for the most part are genuine. It's not as if all the superheroes in this world are cynical or up to something crazy or trying to be mean and violent to people. Most of the characters that we see are genuine about wanting to protect people. They have flaws for the most part, but nothing super terrible. But this is contrasted by the fact that the show can get really violent and really brutal sometimes, which makes sense, right? When you're thinking about a world with all these superpowered villains, the stakes can get higher. The consequences for messing up they can go way more deadly and they can go bad really fast. And that kind of contrast of that genuineness mixed with that brutality at every corner keeps the show really dynamic. Now that I'm thinking about it, it kind of reminds me of something like Game of Thrones. Except Game of Thrones can also be kind of dark and cynical. But in terms of the fact that characters are not really safe and consequences can be very swift and deadly. So that is what I think is the real secret sauce of this show. And to be real, I heard that Incredible has been greenlit for 2 more seasons. And I'm just ready to see how crazy this show can really get and how expansive this world can get. I would really say with this season 1 ending, it actually feels like the show is actually starting now, but not in a way where watching the season 1, you're kind of going, oh man, when is the show going to really start getting good? The show is already good. It's just that the way the first season ends, it just opens up all these possibilities now that I'm really looking forward to seeing how they pay off in the later seasons. So I would say for Invincible season 1, if you're looking for something that is kind of riffing on the superhero genre, but not just in a dark, cynical way, the way something like The Boys is, and you do want some of that genuine superhero thrill mixed with some of that brutal violence, I think Invincible is the show for you. And with that, I'm going to give Invincible season 1 an 8 out of 10. So hey, let me know what you guys thought about the show. Leave your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll make sure to comment back. And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.